The blood in the snow looked black under the pale winter moon, and Hannah Lawson nearly rode right past the dying man without seeing him at all. Her horse whinnied and pulled sideways, refusing to continue down the trail, and that was when she saw the dark shape half buried in the snowdrift beside the frozen creek. At first, she thought it was a fallen tree or perhaps a dead animal, but then the shape moved, just barely, and she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. It was the sound of someone trying to breathe through lungs that were filling with something they should not contain. Hannah dismounted quickly, her boots sinking deep into the February snow. The cold bit through her wool coat, but she barely noticed as she stumbled toward the figure. When she got close enough, she saw it was a man, lying face down, his dark hair matted with ice and blood. A spreading stain darkened the snow beneath him, and she could see the torn fabric of his coat where something sharp had gone in. Not something. Someone had done this deliberately. "Mister," she said, dropping to her knees beside him. Her hands shook as she reached out to touch his shoulder. "Mister, can you hear me?" He made that terrible rattling sound again, and she knew she had to move him, had to get him somewhere warm, even though moving him might kill him just as surely as leaving him here would. Hannah was 22 years old, unmarried, and living alone on her father's old ranch 5 miles outside Buffalo, Wyoming. She had been heading back from town with supplies when her horse had sensed something wrong. Now she looked at this stranger and knew that whatever happened next would change everything. She was not a large woman, standing just over 5 feet tall, but ranch work had made her strong. She managed to roll him onto his back, and in the moonlight, she could see his face. He was young, probably not much older than she was, with a strong jaw and dark stubble covering his cheeks. His lips were blue, and his breathing was so shallow she had to lean close to feel the air moving at all. "I am going to get you home," she told him, though she doubted he could hear her. "You just hold on." Getting him onto her horse was the hardest thing she had ever done. He was dead weight, unconscious and bleeding, and her mare kept dancing sideways in fear at the smell of blood. Hannah talked to the horse in low, soothing tones while she struggled to lift the man. She finally managed to drape him over the saddle, and she led the horse on foot through the snow, moving as quickly as she dared. Every few minutes, she stopped to check that he was still breathing, and every time she felt that faint whisper of air against her palm, she thanked God and kept walking. The ranch house was dark when she finally reached it, and getting the man inside and onto the kitchen table took the last of her strength. She lit every lamp she had and stoked the fire in the stove until the room was almost too warm. Then she took her father's good scissors and cut away the stranger's coat and shirt. The wound was in his left side, just below his ribs. It was a stab wound, clean-edged and deep, and it was still bleeding sluggishly. Hannah had helped birth calves and stitch up horses. She had set her father's broken arm the year before he died. She knew enough about wounds to understand that this man should probably already be dead, and that if she did not do something right now, he would be dead before morning. She boiled water and found the bottle of whiskey her father had kept for emergencies. She threaded a needle with the steadiest hands she could manage and poured whiskey over everything, including the wound itself. The man did not even flinch, which scared her more than anything else. Then she began to stitch, working by lamplight, her fingers slippery with blood. She had to stop twice to vomit into the slop bucket, but she kept going back until the wound was closed. When it was done, she bandaged him with clean strips torn from an old sheet. She managed to get him off the table and onto the bed in the small room off the kitchen, the room where her father had slept during his final illness. She covered him with every blanket she owned, and then sat in the chair beside the bed, watching his chest rise and fall, waiting to see if he would live or die. She must have fallen asleep because when she opened her eyes, pale winter sunlight was streaming through the window and the man's eyes were open. He was staring at the ceiling, his face gray with pain and shock. When he turned his head and saw her, he tried to speak, but no sound came out. "Do not try to talk," Hannah said, standing up quickly. Her back ached from sleeping in the chair, and her hands were still stained with dried blood. "You were stabbed and left in the snow. I found you last night and brought you here. You are at the Lawson Ranch, 5 miles outside Buffalo." "My name is Hannah." He swallowed hard, his throat working. "Water," he managed to whisper. She brought him water and helped him drink, supporting his head with one hand. He took 3 small sips and then lay back, exhausted by even that small effort. A fever was already starting to burn in his eyes, and she knew the real fight was just beginning. "What is your name?" she asked. "Daniel," he said. "Daniel Mitchell." "Who did this to you, Daniel Mitchell?" His eyes closed, and she thought he had passed out again, but then he said, "My brother." Hannah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter cold. "Your brother stabbed you, half-brother," Daniel corrected, his voice barely audible. "Thomas. He wanted the ranch. Our father died 3 months ago and left it to me. Thomas did not take it well. Where is this ranch?" "North of here. 2 days' ride. Near Casey." He opened his eyes again and looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "He thinks I am dead. Better if he keeps thinking that." "You nearly are dead," Hannah said bluntly. "You have a fever starting, and that wound could still go bad. You are not going anywhere for a long time." "Cannot stay here," Daniel said, trying to push himself up. "Too dangerous. If Thomas finds out I am alive, if he comes here, you could get hurt." "You lie back down right now," Hannah ordered, putting a firm hand on his shoulder. The heat of his fever was already radiating through the blanket. "You are in no condition to be making decisions about anything. I will worry about danger. You worry about not dying." He looked at her for a long moment, and then something that might have been a smile touched his lips. "Yes, madam," he said, and closed his eyes. The fever took hold that afternoon and did not break for 3 days. Hannah barely left his side during that time. She changed his bandages twice a day, pouring whiskey into the wound even though he screamed in his delirium when she did it. She forced water between his lips every hour, and when he was lucid enough to eat, she spooned broth into his mouth. She kept the fire burning hot and the blankets piled high, and when he thrashed and called out names she did not know, she held his hand and told him he was safe. On the 3rd night, the fever broke. Hannah woke in her chair to find him looking at her, his eyes clear for the first time since that first morning. His face was thinner, his cheeks hollow, but the grayness was gone. "You are still here," he said. "Where else would I be? This is my house. You could have left me to manage on my own. Most people would have." "Then most people are fools," Hannah said. "You would have been dead in an hour if I had left you alone." "Thank you," Daniel said quietly. "I owe you my life." "You do not owe me anything," Hannah told him. "I did what anyone would do." "No," Daniel said. "You did what a good person would do. That is not the same as anyone." Hannah felt heat rise to her cheeks and stood up quickly. "I will make you something to eat. You need to get your strength back." She made him eggs and bread, and he ate slowly, carefully, as if he were learning how to use his hands again. When he was finished, he lay back against the pillow, exhausted from the effort. "How long have I been here?" he asked. 4 days, counting the night I found you. 4 days. He closed his eyes. "Thomas will have filed a claim on the ranch by now. Told everyone I ran off or got killed by Indians. No one will question it. What about your father's will? Filed in Sheridan. But without me there to contest Thomas's claim, a judge could rule in his favor. The ranch was supposed to go to me because I am the one who worked it, who built it up. Thomas just showed up 6 months ago after our father got sick, playing the devoted son. Our father saw through it, but Thomas does not care about what he saw. He cares about money. How old are you? Hannah asked suddenly. Daniel looked surprised by the question. 26. Why? Just wondering. I am 22. She did not know why it seemed important to establish that, but it did. Where is your mother? Dead. She died when I was born. My father remarried when I was 5 and Thomas came along a year later. That marriage did not last. Thomas went with his mother when they split and I did not see him again until last fall. I am sorry, Hannah said. About your father. He was a good man. He taught me everything I know about ranching. I wish he had lived long enough to see what we built together. Daniel's voice was heavy with grief. Now Thomas is going to sell it off piece by piece to the highest bidder. Maybe not, Hannah said. You are alive. That changes things. If I go back now, Thomas will finish what he started. He had 2 men with him when he stabbed me. They are the ones who threw me in that snowdrift and left me to freeze. I was barely conscious, but I heard them talking. They were going to come back in the spring to make sure the body was really there, that I had not somehow crawled away. If I show up now, Thomas will know he has to move faster, and he will not make the mistake of leaving me alive a second time. So, what are you going to do? I do not know yet, Daniel admitted. I need time to think, time to heal, time to figure out how to prove what Thomas did. You can stay here, Hannah said. The words came out before she had fully thought them through, but once they were spoken, she did not want to take them back. Stay here until you are strong enough to decide what comes next. This ranch is small, but it is mine free and clear. My father left no debts. No one bothers me out here. You will be safe. Daniel looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. Why would you do that for a stranger? Maybe I am tired of being alone, Hannah said honestly. My father died a year ago. My mother died when I was 15. I have no siblings, no close neighbors. Some days I go a week without speaking to another human being. Maybe I am being selfish, but having someone else here, even if it is just until you heal, would be a kindness to me as much as to you. I can work, Daniel said. As soon as I am able, I will earn my keep. We will see about that. Right now you need to rest and get better. Spring is still months away. We have time. Time moved differently during those weeks of recovery. Days blended together in a rhythm of small tasks and quiet conversations. Hannah watched as Daniel slowly regained his strength, first sitting up on his own, then standing with help, then walking a few steps across the room. The wound healed cleanly, leaving a puckered red scar that would fade to white over time. By the end of February, Daniel was able to move around the house without help, though he still tired easily. He insisted on making himself useful, so Hannah let him sit at the kitchen table and help with small tasks like mending harness leather or sharpening knives. They talked while they worked, sharing stories about their lives. Hannah learned that Daniel had taught himself to read from his father's collection of books, that he had a gift for working with horses, and that he had once thought about becoming a doctor before his father's health had declined, and he was needed full-time on the ranch. Daniel learned that Hannah had run the ranch largely on her own for the last 3 years of her father's life, that she could shoot better than most men, and that she had a small herd of cattle she was trying to build up with careful breeding. Why did you never marry? Daniel asked one evening as they sat by the fire. It was a bold question, but they had grown comfortable enough with each other that Hannah did not take offense. No one ever asked, she said simply. The few eligible men in Buffalo thought I was too independent, too outspoken. They wanted a wife who would stay home and keep house, not a woman who could rope a steer and mend her own fences. I tried being what they wanted for a while when I was younger, but it felt like wearing a dress 3 sizes too small. Eventually, I stopped trying. "Their loss," Daniel said. "What about you? Did you leave a sweetheart behind when your brother tried to kill you?" Daniel shook his head. "No time for that. The ranch took everything I had. I thought maybe someday, when things were more settled, but there was always one more thing that needed doing. One more fence to build, one more field to clear. I kept thinking I had time." He stared into the fire. "Funny how quickly things can change." "You still have time," Hannah said. "You are only 26 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. If I can figure out how to get my ranch back, if Thomas does not succeed in killing me." "You will," Hannah said with a confidence she did not entirely feel. "We will figure something out." That night, lying in her own bed for the first time in weeks, Hannah admitted to herself something she had been trying to ignore. She was starting to care for Daniel Mitchell. It was more than just sympathy for an injured man, or the natural closeness that came from nursing someone back to health. She liked the sound of his voice, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the careful way he handled her father's tools as if he understood their value. She liked having him in her house, at her table in her life. It was a dangerous thing to feel. He would leave eventually. He had a ranch to reclaim, a life to get back to. She was just a temporary stop on his journey, a safe place to heal before he moved on. Letting herself care too much would only lead to heartbreak when he left, but knowing that did not make her feel it any less. March came in cold and stormy. A blizzard hit in the second week, dropping 2 feet of snow and keeping them trapped inside for 3 days. They played cards by the fire and read aloud from her father's books. Daniel was strong enough now to help with the evening chores, so they worked together to care for the horses and Hannah's small herd of cattle. They moved around each other in the barn with an easy coordination, as if they had been working together for years instead of weeks. On the third night of the storm, as they sat together after supper, Daniel said, "I have been thinking about what to do about Thomas." Hannah set down her mending. "And I need to go back to Sheridan, to the county clerk's office where my father's will is filed. I need to get a certified copy and bring it to the sheriff in Buffalo. Then I need to file a formal complaint against Thomas for attempted murder. Once that is done, the law will have to investigate and Thomas will not be able to just make me disappear." "That is a good plan," Hannah said. "But Thomas will be watching for you. The moment you show your face in Sheridan, word will get back to him." "I know. That is why I need to do it quickly, all in one day if possible. Ride in at dawn, get the documents, file the complaint, and be gone before Thomas knows I was there." "You should not go alone. I will not risk you." "I am not asking your permission," Hannah said firmly. "If you are going to ride to Sheridan, I am going with you. You are still not fully healed, and if Thomas's men find you, you will need someone to watch your back." "Hannah, do not argue with me, Daniel Mitchell. I saved your life once. I am not going to let you throw it away now because you are too stubborn to accept help." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, and then he started to laugh. It was the first time she had heard him really laugh, and the sound of it filled the small house with warmth. "Has anyone ever told you that you are a force of nature? My father used to say I could argue down a judge and out-stubborn a mule. He was right." Daniel's expression grew serious. "If we do this, if you come with me, you need to understand the danger. Thomas killed once. He will not hesitate to do it again, especially if he thinks there are witnesses." "I understand," Hannah said. "When do we leave?" "Next week, as soon as the snow melts enough to make the pass." It is a 2-day ride to Sheridan if the weather holds. They spent the next week preparing. Daniel practiced with his gun, working to regain the speed and accuracy he had lost during his recovery. Hannah checked their supplies and made sure they had enough food for 4 days of travel. She also packed her father's rifle and made sure it was cleaned and loaded. On the morning they were supposed to leave, Hannah woke before dawn to find Daniel already up, standing by the window and looking out at the pre-dawn darkness. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand rested on the butt of his gun. Having second thoughts, she asked, he turned to face her. About going to Sheridan? No. About bringing you with me? Yes. Every time I think about what could happen, about the ways this could go wrong, I think I should tie you to a chair and leave you here where you will be safe. That would not work, Hannah said. I would just chew through the ropes and follow you. I know. Daniel crossed the room to stand in front of her. In the dim light, his eyes were very dark, very intense. I do not want you to get hurt because of me. I do not think I could live with that. Then we will make sure I do not get hurt, Hannah said. We will be careful, and we will watch each other's backs, and we will get through this together. Together, Daniel repeated, and something in the way he said it made Hannah's heart beat faster. They left an hour later, as the sun was just beginning to light the eastern sky. The ride to Sheridan took them north through country Hannah knew well, then into higher elevations where the snow still lay thick on the ground. They made good time the first day, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat a cold lunch. When night fell, they made camp in a sheltered grove of pine trees, building a small fire and taking turns keeping watch. On the second day, the weather turned. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, and by mid-afternoon it was snowing again, thick wet flakes that made it hard to see more than a few yards ahead. They pushed on, knowing they were close to Sheridan now, but the snow was getting heavier and the wind was picking up. We need to find shelter, Hannah shouted over the wind. If this turns into a full blizzard, we could lose the trail. Daniel nodded and turned his horse toward a dark shape in the distance that might have been a building. As they got closer, Hannah could see it was an old line shack, abandoned but still mostly intact. They got the horses inside and unsaddled them, then set about making the place as comfortable as possible for the night. The shack was barely big enough for the two of them and the horses, but it was out of the wind, and there was an old stove in the corner that still worked. Daniel got a fire going while Hannah rubbed down the horses and gave them the last of their grain. Then they sat together by the stove, eating cold biscuits and dried meat, listening to the wind howl outside. I am sorry, Daniel said after a while. I should have checked the weather more carefully before we left. The weather in Wyoming does not care about your plans, Hannah said. We will wait out the storm and get to Sheridan tomorrow. We are close now. Another few hours in good weather, Daniel agreed. He was quiet for a moment, then said, Hannah, there is something I need to tell you. What is it? These last few weeks staying at your ranch, getting to know you. It has meant more to me than I know how to say. You saved my life, yes, but you did more than that. You gave me a reason to keep fighting, to not give up. When I was lying in that snow, bleeding out, part of me just wanted to let go. It would have been easier. But then you found me and you did not give up on me, and that made me want to live. Hannah's throat felt tight. I am glad I found you. I am too. And I need you to know that no matter what happens tomorrow, no matter how this turns out with Thomas and the ranch, I do not want to lose you. These weeks with you have been the best of my life, and I know that sounds crazy because I nearly died and I lost everything, but it is true. Being with you has made me happier than I have ever been. Daniel, I am not saying this right, he interrupted. What I am trying to say is that I have feelings for you. Strong feelings. I think I started falling for you the first time you ordered me to lie back down and told me you would worry about the danger. You were so fierce, so certain, so completely unafraid. I had never met anyone like you. Hannah felt like her heart might burst right out of her chest. I have feelings for you too, she said quietly. I tried not to. I told myself you would leave as soon as you were healed, that letting myself care would only lead to hurt, but I could not help it. You made me laugh again. You made my house feel like a home instead of just a place to live. You made me remember what it feels like to want something more than just getting through each day. Daniel reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused, and when his fingers closed around hers, Hannah felt a sense of rightness that went all the way to her bones. I do not know what tomorrow will bring, Daniel said. I do not know if I will get my ranch back or if Thomas will win. But I know that whatever happens, I want you in my life. If you will have me. I will have you, Hannah said, and then she was in his arms and he was kissing her with a desperate sweetness that made the whole world fall away. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the tiny line shack, surrounded by the sound of wind and the warmth of the fire, Hannah felt safer and more certain than she had in years. They held each other through the night, talking in low voices about their hopes and dreams, about what they would do when this was over, about the life they might build together. Daniel told her about his ranch, about the house his father had built and the plans he had for expansion. Hannah told him about her dreams for her own little spread, about the cattle she wanted to breed and the horses she wanted to raise. They made plans that might never come to pass, but in that moment, with Daniel's arms around her and the future stretching out before them, anything seemed possible. The storm cleared by morning, leaving the world white and sparkling under a brilliant blue sky. They reached Sheridan by mid-morning, riding into town carefully, watching for any sign of Thomas or his men. The county clerk's office was in the courthouse, a solid brick building in the center of town. Daniel went inside while Hannah waited with the horses, her hand resting on the rifle strapped to her saddle. He was inside for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 20 minutes. When he emerged, he was carrying a folded document and his face was grim. "What is it?" Hannah asked. Thomas filed papers saying I abandoned the ranch, and he is the rightful heir. The clerk said a judge has already reviewed it and is expected to rule in Thomas's favor within the week, unless I contest the claim in person. Then we go to the sheriff right now. The sheriff's office was 2 blocks away. Sheriff William Crane was a weathered man in his 50s with suspicious eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He listened as Daniel told his story, occasionally interrupting to ask questions. When Daniel was finished, the sheriff leaned back in his chair and studied them both. "That is quite a tale," he said. "You have any proof of what you are saying?" Daniel pulled aside his shirt to show the still healing scar on his side. "This is where my brother stabbed me. Miss Lawson found me in a snowdrift and saved my life. She can confirm everything I have told you." The sheriff looked at Hannah. "That true, miss?" "Every word," Hannah said. "I found him on the night of February 11th, bleeding out on the trail 5 miles south of my ranch. If I had not come along when I did, he would be dead." "And you can identify the men who did this?" the sheriff asked Daniel. "My half-brother, Thomas Mitchell, and 2 ranch hands he hired last fall. I do not know their names, but I would recognize their faces." The sheriff was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I will open an investigation, but I have to tell you this is going to be difficult to prove. Your brother will deny everything, and without witnesses, it is your word against his." "What about the medical evidence?" Hannah demanded. "Daniel was stabbed and left to die. That is not in dispute." "No, but proving who did it is another matter. And even if we can prove it, getting a conviction will be hard. Juries are not always sympathetic to family disputes that turn violent." "So you are saying he might get away with it," Daniel said flatly. "I am saying the law moves slowly and justice is not always certain, but I will do what I can. I will ride out to your ranch tomorrow and question your brother. If his story does not add up, We will take it from there." It was not the answer they had hoped for, but it was something. They left the sheriff's office and headed out of town, riding hard to put distance between themselves and Sheridan. Neither of them spoke much during that first hour. They were both lost in thought, wondering what would happen next, whether the sheriff's investigation would be enough to bring Thomas to justice. They were about 10 miles outside of Sheridan when they saw the riders. There were 3 of them, coming hard from the north, and even from a distance, Hannah could see that they were heading straight for them. "That is Thomas," Daniel said, his voice tight. "He must have had someone watching the sheriff's office." "Ride," Hannah said, but Daniel shook his head. "Running will not help. They will catch us eventually. Better to face them now together." They reined in their horses and waited. As the riders got closer, Hannah could see that the man in front was younger than Daniel, with sandy hair and a cruel twist to his mouth. The 2 men with him were rough-looking types, hired guns with hard eyes and weathered faces. Thomas pulled up his horse about 20 feet away. He stared at Daniel with an expression that was equal parts shock and fury. "You should be dead," Thomas said. "Disappointed?" Daniel asked. "How are you alive? We left you bleeding in the snow. You should have frozen to death within hours." "Turns out your plan was not as perfect as you thought," Daniel said. "I survived, and now the sheriff knows what you did." Thomas's face darkened. "You think anyone will believe you?" "You are a liar and a coward who abandoned his responsibilities. I am the one who stayed and took care of the ranch after our father died. Any judge will see that. Any judge who sees the scar you left on my side will have questions," Daniel countered. "And I am betting your 2 friends here will be real eager to talk once the sheriff starts asking hard questions." One of the hired guns shifted nervously in his saddle, and Thomas shot him a sharp look. "No one is talking to any sheriff. This ends here now. You should have stayed dead, brother. Now I am going to have to finish what I started." His hand dropped to his gun, but Daniel was faster. The shot cracked through the cold air, and Thomas's gun went spinning out of his hand. He cried out in pain and clutched his wrist. "Next one goes in your chest," Daniel said, his voice cold. "Just like you put your knife in mine." The 2 hired guns had their hands up, clearly wanting no part of this fight. Thomas looked at them with contempt, then back at Daniel. "This is not over," Thomas said. "Yes, it is," Daniel said. "You lost. The sheriff knows what you did, and soon everyone else will too. You are going to prison, Thomas, and I am going to get the ranch back. You cannot prove anything. I think those 2 gentlemen with you might disagree once they realize they are facing murder charges. One of them is bound to turn on you to save his own skin. That is how it always works with men like you. You have no loyalty, so you do not inspire any." Thomas looked like he wanted to say more, but then they heard the sound of more horses approaching. It was the sheriff and 2 deputies, riding hard. Thomas's face went pale as he realized he had been set up. "Sheriff Crane," Daniel said calmly, "glad you could join us. I believe you have some questions for my brother." The sheriff took in the scene with a quick glance, Thomas holding his bloody wrist, the gun on the ground, Daniel with his weapon still drawn. "I think I have all the answers I need," he said. "Thomas Mitchell, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of your brother. You too as well," he added, nodding at the hired guns. "We will sort out who did what once we get back to town." As the sheriff and his deputies took Thomas and the others into custody, Hannah felt the tension drain out of her body. It was over. Really over. Daniel holstered his gun and turned to look at her, and the relief and joy on his face made her heart soar. "We did it," he said. "You did it," Hannah corrected. "You faced him down and you won. I never could have done it without you." Daniel crossed to her and took both her hands in his. "You saved my life in that snowdrift, but you did more than that. You gave me back my courage, my hope, my will to fight. You gave me a future worth fighting for." "What happens now?" Hannah asked. "Now we go home," Daniel said, "and we figure out what that future looks like, together." They returned to Buffalo 3 days later, after giving statements to the sheriff and starting the legal process to reclaim Daniel's ranch. The trial would take months, but with Thomas's hired guns turning on him in exchange for lighter sentences, the outcome was all but certain. Daniel would get his ranch back, and Thomas would spend the next decade or more behind bars. But that was a problem for later. For now, they were content to be back at Hannah's ranch, safe and together, watching spring slowly arrive in the high country. The days grew longer and warmer, and the snow began to melt, revealing the brown grass beneath. Daniel's wound healed completely, leaving only a thin white scar as a reminder of how close he had come to death. They worked together to prepare the ranch for the summer, mending fences and caring for the cattle. Daniel proved to be as skilled with ranch work as he had claimed, and Hannah found herself relying on his judgment and expertise more and more. They moved together with an easy rhythm, partners in work as they were becoming partners in life. One evening in late April, as they sat together on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Daniel said, "I have been thinking about the future." "What about it?" "The trial should be over by midsummer. Once I get the ranch back, I am going to have decisions to make about what to do with it. It is a good piece of land, bigger than this place, with a solid house and good grazing. But it is also where my father died, where Thomas tried to kill me. I am not sure I want to go back there, even if it is legally mine again." "What would you do instead?" "I thought maybe I could sell it. Use the money to expand this place, build it up into something really special. We could combine our herds, add on to the house, maybe hire a hand or two to help with the work. Make it a real partnership." Hannah turned to look at him. "A partnership, a marriage, if you will have me." Daniel took her hand. "I know we have not known each other long. Less than 3 months, if you count the time I was unconscious and out of my head with fever. But I know my own heart, and I know that I love you. I want to build a life with you, right here on this land that already feels like home. Will you marry me, Hannah Lawson?" Hannah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Hannah knew that this was the beginning of something wonderful. All the loneliness of the past years, all the hard work and struggle and grief, had led her to that moment on the trail when her horse had shied away from a dark shape in the snow. She had saved a stranger's life that day, and in doing so, she had saved her own. They were married in June, a simple ceremony in Buffalo with the sheriff and his wife as witnesses. Hannah wore her mother's wedding dress, which she had altered to fit, and Daniel wore a new suit he had bought specially for the occasion. They exchanged rings made of silver mined from the mountains they could see from their porch, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Daniel kissed her with such joy that everyone in the little church cheered. The trial concluded in July, exactly as Daniel had predicted. Thomas was found guilty of attempted murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison. His hired guns received lesser sentences in exchange for their testimony. Daniel reclaimed his father's ranch and put it up for sale. By September, he had a buyer, a rancher from Texas, who paid a fair price and seemed like a decent sort who would take care of the land. With that money, Daniel and Hannah expanded their operations significantly. They added 200 acres to their spread, built a new barn, and bought additional cattle and horses. They hired 2 ranch hands, a father and son team who had recently moved to Wyoming from Colorado. The house was expanded to include 2 more bedrooms, a proper dining room, and a larger kitchen where Hannah could cook for their growing household. The first winter of their marriage was mild by Wyoming standards, with less snow than usual and temperatures that rarely dropped below zero. Daniel taught Hannah everything his father had taught him about managing a large ranch, and Hannah shared her own knowledge about selective breeding and animal husbandry. They made a formidable team, respected by their neighbors and known for running a fair and profitable operation. In the spring, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and a little fear. Having a child was always risky, especially in the remote country where they lived, far from doctors and hospitals. But Hannah was strong and healthy, and Daniel was determined to make sure she had everything she needed. The baby came in November, a week before Thanksgiving. It was a long labor, but Hannah was as strong and fierce in childbirth as she was in everything else. When the midwife finally placed the tiny bundle in Daniel's arms, he looked down at his son with such wonder that Hannah started to cry all over again. "What should we name him?" Daniel asked. "William," Hannah said. "After your father. He should know where he came from, who came before him." "William Mitchell," Daniel said, testing the name. "I like it. Welcome to the world, son." Little William was a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined chin. He grew quickly, thriving in the clean mountain air and the love of his parents. Daniel proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle but firm when it was needed. Hannah watched him with their son and fell in love with him all over again. The years that followed were good ones, full of hard work and simple pleasures. They added more children to their family, a daughter named Alina when William was 3, and another son named James 2 years after that. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, predators and disease, but they weathered them together, and that made all the difference. On the 5th anniversary of the day Hannah found Daniel in the snow, they rode together to the spot where it had all begun. It was summer now, and the trail was green and lush, with wildflowers blooming in the meadow beside the creek. Nothing about the place suggested the life and death drama that had played out there on that frozen February night. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your horse had not shied that night?" Daniel asked. "If you had just ridden past?" "I try not to," Hannah admitted. "It is too terrible to think about." "I think about it sometimes," Daniel said. "Not because I want to dwell on the horror of it, but because I want to remember how precious life is. How quickly things can change, how much can hinge on a single moment, a single choice." "Your brother's choice to attack you," Hannah said, "and your choice to stop and help. My brother chose evil, but you chose good, and that made all the difference. Not just for me, but for everyone our lives have touched since then. Our children exist because you made that choice. The people we employ, the neighbors we help, the community we are part of, all of it flows from that one moment when you decided to stop and see what your horse was afraid of." Hannah leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "I would make that choice again," she said. "1,000 times over I would make that choice. I know you would. That is who you are. That is why I love you." They stood there for a while, holding each other, remembering and giving thanks. Then they mounted their horses and rode back toward home, where their children waited, where their life together continued to unfold in ways they could never have imagined on that desperate, frozen night 5 years before. The ranch continued to grow and prosper over the following years. By the time William was 10, they had expanded their holdings to nearly 2,000 acres, with a herd of 500 head of cattle and some of the finest horses in Wyoming. Daniel's reputation as a horseman grew, and he began breeding horses specifically for ranch work smart, steady animals that could handle the rugged terrain and harsh weather of the high country. Alina proved to have her mother's gift with animals and her father's quiet determination. At 8 years old, she could already ride as well as some of the ranch hands, and she had a gentle touch with skittish horses that made her invaluable during training season. James was more interested in the business side of ranching, even at 6. He liked to sit with Daniel in the evening while his father went over the account books, asking questions about prices and markets and profit margins. In the summer when William turned 12, they took on an apprentice, a young man of 18 named Samuel, who had been orphaned the previous winter and needed work. Daniel saw something of himself in the boy's determination and hired him on the spot. Samuel became part of the family, eating meals with them and eventually building his own small cabin on the edge of the property. Hannah's reputation as a healer grew as well. She had learned a great deal from keeping Daniel alive during those first desperate weeks, and she continued to study healing herbs and remedies. Neighbors began to come to her when their children were sick or they had injuries that needed tending. She never charged for her help, but people always found ways to repay her kindness: a side of beef, a sack of flour, help with the harvest. Life was not always easy. There were droughts and blizzards, cattle that died and crops that failed. In William's 14th year, a pack of wolves came down from the mountains and killed a dozen calves before they could be hunted down. The following spring, a prairie fire swept through the southern edge of their property, destroying a hay barn and nearly reaching the main house before they managed to contain it. But through all of it, Daniel and Hannah faced each challenge together, drawing strength from each other and from the family they had built. Their marriage deepened with each passing year, the initial passion maturing into something steadier and more profound: a partnership of equals, a friendship as strong as their love, a commitment that nothing could shake. On their 15th anniversary, Daniel surprised Hannah with a trip to Cheyenne. They left the children with Samuel and the ranch hands and took the train south, staying in a hotel that seemed impossibly grand and elegant after years of ranch living. They attended a theater performance and ate in restaurants where other people cooked the food and cleared the plates. It was wonderful and strange and made them both realize how completely their lives had become intertwined with the land and the work they did. "You ever regret it?" Daniel asked her on their last night in Cheyenne as they sat together in their hotel room. "Choosing this life, I mean. You could have sold the ranch after your father died, moved to a city, had an easier life." "Easier does not mean better," Hannah said. "I love our life, I love our children. I love waking up every morning knowing that we built something together, something that will outlast us. How could I regret that?" "I love you," Daniel said. "I do not say it enough, but I do. Every single day I look at you and I think about that night in the snow, about how close I came to never knowing you, and I thank God that your horse was smarter than you were." Hannah laughed. "My horse saved your life. I am just the one who listened." "You saved my life," Daniel corrected. "In every way that matters. You gave me a reason to live and a reason to keep fighting. You gave me a home and a family and a future. Everything good in my life started the night you found me." "Everything good in my life started that night too," Hannah said. "I just did not know it yet." They returned to the ranch renewed and ready to face whatever came next. William was 17 now and taking on more responsibility, learning the business from his father and proving himself to be a capable and thoughtful young man. Alina was 15 and starting to notice the young men in town, though she swore she was too busy with the horses to be bothered with courting. James was 13 and already talking about going to college back east to study business and finance, dreams that both excited and worried his parents. The ranch continued to prosper. They weathered the financial panic of 1893 better than many of their neighbors, thanks to Daniel's conservative financial management and their diverse operations. They helped where they could, buying cattle from struggling ranchers at fair prices and hiring men who had lost their jobs in town. It cost them some profit, but they had always believed that being part of a community meant helping in hard times as well as good. In 1895, a man came to the ranch asking to speak with Daniel. He was a lawyer from Sheridan, representing Thomas Mitchell, who was being released from prison after serving 13 years of his 15-year sentence for good behavior. Thomas wanted to see Daniel, wanted to apologize and ask for his forgiveness. Daniel's first instinct was to refuse. What Thomas had done was unforgivable. He had tried to kill his own brother out of greed and jealousy. He had left Daniel to die in the snow. Only Hannah's chance discovery had prevented Thomas from succeeding, but Hannah saw the torment in her husband's eyes and knew that refusing would leave the wound open forever. "Go see him," she said. "You do not have to forgive him. You do not have to give him anything, but hear what he has to say. For your own sake, if nothing else, so you can put it behind you once and for all." So Daniel rode to Sheridan with the lawyer, leaving Hannah to manage the ranch. He met Thomas in a small office on the main street. 13 years in prison had changed his half-brother dramatically. Thomas was thin and gray, his hands trembling, his eyes haunted. He looked much older than his 40 years. "I do not expect your forgiveness," Thomas said without preamble. "I do not deserve it. What I did was evil, and I have spent every day of the last 13 years thinking about it, regretting it, wishing I could take it back. But I cannot. All I can do is tell you I am sorry and mean it with every fiber of my being." Daniel studied his half-brother, looking for signs of deception, but all he saw was genuine remorse. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "What made you think killing me was the answer?" "Jealousy," Thomas said simply. "Our father always loved you more, trusted you more. You were the one he taught, the one he relied on. I was just the disappointment, the son from his failed second marriage. When he died and left everything to you, it felt like the final rejection. But that is not your fault. You did nothing wrong. The fault was all mine and the devil I let into my heart. What will you do now? Try to build some kind of life, I suppose. The lawyer says there is a ranch hand job available in Montana. It is hard work for low pay, but it is honest. I will take it. I will spend the rest of my life trying to do some good, to balance out the evil I did. It will not be enough, but it is all I have." Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I forgive you." Thomas looked up, his eyes wide with shock. "What? I forgive you," Daniel repeated. "Not because you deserve it, but because carrying this hatred around is poisoning me. I have a good life, a wife I love, children who make me proud. I have built something worth protecting. But every time I think about you, about what you did, I feel that old anger and hatred rising up, and it makes me someone I do not want to be. So I am letting it go. I am forgiving you. For my sake, not yours." Tears streamed down Thomas's face. "Thank you," he whispered. "I do not deserve it, but thank you. You are right. You do not deserve it, but I am giving it anyway. That is what forgiveness is." Daniel stood up. "I hope you find peace, Thomas. I hope you build a good life in Montana, but I do not want to see you again. This is goodbye." "I understand." "Goodbye, brother, and thank you." Daniel rode home that night feeling lighter than he had in years. He told Hannah everything, and she held him while he cried, releasing 15 years of anger and pain and fear. When it was done, when the tears had stopped, he felt cleansed, renewed, ready to face the future without the weight of the past dragging him down. The new century arrived with celebration and hope. William was 23 now. married to a schoolteacher named Sarah from Buffalo, and they had given Daniel and Hannah their first grandchild, a little girl named Rose. Eleanor, at 21, had finally given in to the persistent courtship of a neighboring rancher's son and was planning a spring wedding. James had finished college and returned home with new ideas about modern ranch management and marketing. The ranch was now one of the largest and most successful in the region, employing a dozen hands year-round and twice that during busy seasons. Daniel and Hannah had built something extraordinary, something that would outlast them and continue to provide for their children and grandchildren. On a cold February evening in 1901, exactly 20 years after Hannah had found Daniel in the snow, they rode out together to that same spot beside the creek. It was snowing lightly, soft flakes drifting down through the twilight, and the world was quiet and still. 20 years, Hannah said, looking around at the familiar landscape. It seems like a lifetime ago and also like yesterday. We were so young, Daniel said. I was 26 and thought I knew everything. Now I am 46 and I realize how little I knew back then. We have learned together, Hannah said. That is the best part of marriage, I think. Growing and learning together, becoming more than you could have been alone. Daniel dismounted and walked to the edge of the snowdrift where Hannah had found him. It looked different now, in the twilight and the falling snow, but he could still remember every detail of that night, the cold, the pain, the certainty that he was dying, and then Hannah's voice cutting through the darkness, calling him back to life. I think about it sometimes, he said. How close I came to missing all of this. My life with you, our children, our grandchildren, this ranch we built together. If you had been riding a different trail, if your horse had not sensed something wrong, if you had decided it was too dangerous to stop and check, I would have died in this snow and none of the last 20 years would have happened. But I did stop, Hannah said, coming to stand beside him, and you did live, and we built this beautiful life together. That is what matters. I used to think my life began when my father taught me about ranching, Daniel said. But I was wrong. My life began the night you found me and decided I was worth saving. Everything before that was just prologue. Everything after has been the real story. Hannah took his hand. Our story, she corrected. We wrote it together. They stood there for a while, holding hands in the falling snow, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something lasting and true. Then they mounted their horses and rode home through the winter twilight, toward the warm lights of the house where their family waited, where their life together continued to unfold in joy and love and partnership. The years that followed brought more grandchildren, 6 in total by the time Daniel turned 50. William and Sarah added a son. Eleanor and her husband had twin boys, and James, who had married his college sweetheart, had 2 daughters. The ranch house was expanded again to accommodate all the visitors, with a large dining room where 3 generations could gather for Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations. Daniel and Hannah gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, turning over more responsibility to William and James. They had earned their rest, though neither of them could quite stop working entirely. Daniel still spent hours each day with the horses, and Hannah still tended her garden and her healing herbs. They took long rides together in the evenings, exploring the land they had built their lives upon, talking about everything and nothing. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a party that brought together nearly 100 friends and neighbors. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, and a feast that went on until late in the night. But the moment Hannah treasured most came at the end of the evening, when she and Daniel slipped away to the porch and sat together in the darkness, watching the stars come out over the mountains. If you could go back, Daniel said, Back to that night when you found me in the snow, knowing everything that would come after the hard work, the struggles, the fears, and the losses. Would you still stop? Hannah did not even have to think about it. Yes, she said. 1,000 times yes. Every moment of difficulty, every challenge we faced, was worth it for the life we built together. I would not trade a single moment of it. Neither would I, Daniel said. You gave me life that night, Hannah, not just by saving me from the snow, but by showing me what life could be. What love could be. What home meant. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working myself to death on a ranch that did not matter. After you, I had purpose and meaning and joy. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me too, Hannah said. My lonely life, my empty house, my purposeless days, you changed all of that. You gave me partnership and family and love. You made me whole. They held each other then, under the stars. Two people who had been brought together by chance and desperation, and had turned it into something beautiful. The snow where Daniel had nearly died was long melted. The scars from his wound faded to barely visible lines. But the memory remained, a reminder of how fragile life could be and how precious it was to find someone to share it with. Daniel lived to see his 70th birthday, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. He passed peacefully in his sleep on a warm June night, with Hannah holding his hand. The entire town of Buffalo turned out for his funeral, a testament to the respect and love he had earned during his 44 years in Wyoming. Hannah lived another 5 years after Daniel's death, continuing to work in her garden and tend to her neighbors' ailments. She spent long hours with her grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather and about the night she had found him in the snow, the night that had changed both their lives forever. She made sure they understood that love was not something that just happened. It was something you built, day by day, choice by choice, through hard work and dedication and faith. On a cold February evening, exactly 50 years after she had found Daniel, Hannah rode out alone to that spot beside the creek. She was 72 years old, her hair white and her body frail, but her mind was still sharp and her heart was still full. She stood where Daniel had lain dying in the snow and remembered everything: the fear, the determination, the desperate hope that she could save this stranger's life. And she had saved him. They had saved each other, really. Two lonely people, both certain that their best days were behind them, who had found each other in the darkness and built something beautiful together. Hannah knelt down and placed her hand on the snow, and she swore she could feel Daniel there with her, his presence as real as it had been during all their years together. I did not give up on you then, she said quietly, and I will not give up on you now. Wait for me. I will be there soon. She died peacefully 3 weeks later, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her last words a whispered, "I am coming, Daniel. Wait for me." They buried her beside Daniel on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The service was large and full of love, with friends and family coming from across Wyoming to pay their respects. The ranch itself continued to prosper under William's management, and then under his sons, and then under his grandsons. The land that Hannah and Daniel had built their lives upon remained in the family for generations, a lasting testament to the love they had shared and the life they had built. And on cold February nights, when the snow fell soft and quiet over the Wyoming mountains, people swore they could sometimes see two figures riding together along the creek, a man and a woman, young and strong and full of life, forever together in the place where their love had begun. The story of Hannah and Daniel became legend in Buffalo, passed down through generations. It was a story about courage and kindness, about second chances, and the power of love to transform lives. It was a story about a woman who stopped when she could have kept riding, who saved a stranger when she could have looked the other way, who chose compassion over caution and built a life beyond her wildest dreams. And it was a story about a man who refused to give up, even when death seemed certain, who fought his way back to life because someone believed he was worth saving, who took the second chance he was given and used it to build something beautiful and lasting. But most of all, it was a love story. A story about two people who found each other against impossible odds and held on tight, through good times and bad, through joy and sorrow, through 50 years of partnership and love. It was a story about building a life together, one choice at a time, one day at a time, until those days added up to a lifetime of happiness. The ranch still stands today, run by the 6th generation of the Mitchell family. On the wall of the main house hangs a portrait of Hannah and Daniel, painted on their 25th anniversary. They sit together, hands clasped, looking at something beyond the frame, perhaps at the future they were building, perhaps at each other, perhaps at the life they had created from that single moment in the snow, when compassion and desperation met and changed two lives forever. Beneath the portrait is a small brass plaque, engraved with words that Hannah herself had written in her journal years before. He was stabbed and left in the Snowdrift. I found him by accident and saved a stranger's life that day, but he was not a stranger for long. He became my husband, my partner, my love, and saving him saved me too. That is what love does. It saves us all,